door closed?
Okay, now it's filming right there. Yeah, close the door, please. So I'd like to welcome you all to our administrative hearing on the proposed Tesoro Savage Oil Terminal at the Port of Vancouver. This is the time that my staff has scheduled for Vancouver Energy to present testimony as to why the Tesoro Savage Oil Terminal should be approved and constructed at the Port of Vancouver. They are the petitioners in this hearing. The respondents are represented by the Northwest Environmental Community, and they will be presenting testimony as to why the Tesoro Savage Oil Terminal should not be approved and should not be constructed. So without any further ado, the petitioners will go first because it's their petition that they are asking me and my office to approve. So we'll go ahead and let the petitioners present their case as to why, as to the purpose, the factual background, and as to why you guys believe this Tesoro Savage Oil Terminal should be built. With that, we'll turn it over to, as I understand, the Chief Executive Officer of Vancouver Energy. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Do I stand or?
You can sit.
I can sit?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Governor Inslee, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation today. And it's really this is more of an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to deeply consider things. So I hope we can all use this to talk with people and not at people today. And what we have today in our plan, right now it's just a plan. It sounds like it's just a bunch of words, but eventually this will be and grow into a tree. And that tree will be deeply rooted in our core values. And I want to talk about our core values. And when you realize the 4 core values that we have, you'll understand that the first value, that this plan is good for the community. Vancouver Energy Fund will recently donated more than $100,000 to local organizations to help cultivate a strong local community. That's our first core value. Our second core value is that this plan is good for America. Vancouver Energy can reduce America's dependence on foreign oil and increase our nation's energy independence and security. Number 3, this plan is good for Southwest Washington. Once operational, the Vancouver Energy will support on average 1,000 jobs each year for the first 2 years. And our last value is that this plan is good for the environment. Vancouver Energy will facilitate movement of Balkan crude oil, which is less carbon intense than what's currently used on the West Coast. So without further ado, all right, I'd like to present the CEO of Savage Energy.
Thank you, CEO. As CEO of Savage, I would like to thank you all for coming here today. Savage Services are acting as the overseers in design management on behalf of the joint venture here in Portland, Vancouver Energy and Tesoro. This is due to our pre-existing facilities in connection with you, the community, who is already here. We'll be able to, here today, address any concerns that you may have about our operation, and I hope we'll be able to communicate as a whole. I'll begin by addressing the Savage system itself, which is designed to create, deliver, and elevate the communities around us. We're creating jobs and opportunities, supplying the area with the best of market resources, protection measures, and a strong lasting relationship to benefit the areas we work with. Our new innovative solutions aim to restructure and better organize pre-existing infrastructure at the heart of the issue. In the areas which we operate, we supply an S7 delivery system, who at the center lies the people we work for, you. The S7 involves all of us really, and surrounding our main objective are safety, health, and the environment. It is with our services our larger customers have cut their transportation costs as much as 50% and reduced emissions by up to 90%, benefiting everyone as a whole. We all have concerns about the local environment here in the Portland-Vancouver area. It's one of our most unique features. It is because of that, despite ensuring almost not even a % chance of an incident, that we have countermeasures in place by working with the Clean Rivers Co-op and the Marine Spill Response Corporations. Both not-for-profit agencies of a combined total of 71 years of experience, which has been dedicated toward keeping Oregon and Washington's waters safe and sustainable. In addition to them, over 20% of the joint investment, $45 million, will be directed to environmental, health, and safety measures. We too are confident that the proposed terminal can be designed, constructed, and operated by you, the locals of the community, in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. Lastly, I'd like to address the benefits that will be coming to our wonderful community. As of December 2015, both Oregon and Washington have had unemployment rates higher than the national average. Our venture here in the Portland-Vancouver area will be able to provide more than 1,000 jobs each year. With that, $2 billion in economic value, 1.6 in labor income, and eventually $7.8 million in tax revenue annually. This is an opportunity that comes to the community that we cannot miss on, and we are a part, all of us, in that community. Should this terminal not be built here, the unfortunate outcome would be alternatives, which could not be more environmentally impactful elsewhere. To conclude, I'd like to reiterate the main objective, that you, the customer, be provided with safety, health, and a sustained environment. Working as a community, we are able to facilitate the unique qualities of the Portland-Vancouver area and hope to maintain them in the years to come. The joint venture made with us and TSOT will help you provide for our communities in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. Thank you for your time, and I hope to welcome our newest member of the community, TSOT.
Everyone, before I get started, Governor Inslee, I would just like to express my personal appreciation to you for conducting these hearings today. And I'd like you to know that TSOT considers this an incredibly valuable opportunity. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present you with a small amount that I'm sure you will put to good use in your community.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for convening today on this beautiful spring morning. I would like to open with a few words about TSOT's reputation. TSOT Oil is deeply committed to environmental protection in every aspect of its business. Each year we produce and publish a sustainability and responsibility report, which is readily available on our website for anyone who's interested. Unlike other companies, we pride ourselves in this transparency because safety and responsibility are an integral part of our environmental responsibility. We have one of the highest railway safety ratings in America, and we do that because we care. The Pacific Northwest is a very beautiful place, as all of you know, and we wouldn't be here under consideration for this bid if we didn't have a commitment to these things. In addition to our reputation, I would also like to discuss our global responsibility. TSOT is a deeply patriotic and American company. We began exploration into the Bakken oil fields last year when we discovered that our primary crude oil importer was funding ISIS and other terrorist organizations. Therefore, reducing our dependence on foreign oil both strengthens our nation and weakens our enemies. I will remind everyone that funding ISIS is leading to more pointless wars, and the U.S. military in 2015 used almost 90 million barrels of crude oil. So that is the ecological cost of war that we do not wish to support. And bringing oil production to the U.S. out of the Middle East will help facilitate that. Thirdly, in addition to our global responsibility, I'd like to discuss the logistics of our plan. In addition to the fact that railway and mining infrastructure already exists in the U.S., our railway transportation contributes a much smaller carbon footprint than our current production freightliners that are traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. The Bakken oil fields operation will take away roughly 200 oil ships, which are currently traveling back and forth across the Atlantic, and this will reduce our carbon footprint by about 30% annually. So that's a pretty huge amount considering that we are one of the larger oil companies in America. So if you are considering the environmental impacts of our railway system, just consider all of the fish that we're going to be saving. So reputation, global responsibility, and ease of the logistics for implementation are all reasons why this plan should move forward, and I hope you will see the reasonability and the logic of our decision. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, we're moving along and we're ahead of schedule. So we'll proceed now to the respondent's executive summary of reasons to not approve the Tesoro Savage Oil Terminal. And first up is Robin.
Awesome. Thank you, Governor Inslee, for having us here today, and thank you, Environmental Vancouver Energy, for your generous contribution to the community. That's great. I'm sure that will go to great use without any consideration outside of this hearing. I'm going to start off by showing that explaining that the Tesoro Savage Oil Terminal upgrade is not only not good for the community, America, Southwest Washington, or the environment. First off, we're talking about adding 3 times more trains going through the Southwest Washington area. We're estimating that once every 2 years, one of those trains will derail at some point. And if we're talking about only 1,000 jobs for every 2 years, and we're talking about a derailment once every 2 years, that seems to be counterintuitive. And once every 20 years, one of those trains will have a spill. The Balkan oil, crude oil, is a very volatile crude oil, and in an event of a spill or a train disaster, we're talking about massive explosions, massive destruction, and shutting down permanently for quite some time all the jobs that you may have potentially provided, and jobs that are currently existing on the river. And on the note of your carbon emissions, this project is estimated to add 54 million metric tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. That's 0.1% of the global carbon emissions. So in reduction, it seems to be counterintuitive as well. Let's see, what else did I have? Good for America. On that note, we are thinking of the American dream here. We all have that American dream, but that also means the American dream for our future generations. We have many people who already exist in this community who rely on this river, who rely on the clean water that it provides for us, who rely on their small businesses. And that is their American dream that is dependent upon the river, that we're putting at just the risks clearly not worth the reward. I don't possibly see any way that this is beneficial to the community in those ways. It's not good for the community, it's not good for America, it's not good for Southwest Washington. It puts us all at risk, and it's completely unacceptable.
Well said. Thank you, Vancouver Energy, for taking the time to put together your wonderful arguments that honestly make sense. And thank you, Governor Inslee, for taking the time to listen to both sides. The first thing I want to go back to is your first core values. Good for the community. Let's look at who lives along the river. You have a lot of in-lieu sites where Native Americans are fishing and trying to protect their treaty rights, as Governor Inslee knows very well. And not only will the possible spills degrade and diminish those usual and accustomed fishing sites, but 3 times more trains thundering down the Columbia River Gorge will obviously be a distraction to not only the fish, but the Native Americans who are trying to cross and have all their equipment and their fishing huts. So to me, it's good for the community, but whose community? Are you talking about the Vancouver community, or are you talking about the indigenous community? So I just question your first core value at that point. So my next point is good for America. You want to reduce dependence on foreign oil. I'm all for that. I think that energy independence is very important. However, you're looking at using this next terminal for 20 to 40 years, and as Robin pointed out, that's going to be 0.12 of all global carbon emissions. And we all know that it's not sustainable. We know that we can't keep pumping up crude oil into the atmosphere and polluting it with carbon dioxide. We know that it's not sustainable. The science is unequivocal. So how can we say this is good for America? Yes, it's good for America right now. We're getting off foreign oil, but we need to look for a different source of energy. Building this oil terminal that's going to use for the next 50 years is insane. It's crazy to me that you're gonna keep polluting when you know that it's not sustainable for America. You talk about how it's good for Southwest Washington and how it's gonna add 1,000 jobs over the next 2 years. However, you talk about how there's $1.6 million in wages. To me, that you're not paying all these workers a fair wage. You're paying half of them minimum wage and your executives way more. So I think that good for Southwest Washington, you're creating 1,000 jobs, but yet you're taking away hundreds of thousands of jobs in the loggers and the fishermen and the people that rely on the river every single day. And fourthly, you talk about how it's good for the environment. Robin already talked about the risk of spills and the risk of derailment, and just adding 3 times more trains just adds that next step of just how many more accidents. And you say you have all these safety boards and things like that, but yet every 2 years is the average of an accident in the US. So I really hard pressed, and I believe you when you say that you have safety as your main concern, but when the statistics show that oil trains derail and explode, I just don't think it's good for the environment. So with that said, I'll pass it back over to Robin. I think that you have a little bit more, do you? Or?
I think we have our more than anthro.
Oh, I apologize.
Yes.
Yes, I apologize.
But thank you for going over all of that. Very, very tactfully.
Okay.
Oh yeah, here we go. Our other executive. Get all ready.
All right, thank you, Governor Inslee, for holding this hearing, giving us an opportunity to explain why this is a really bad idea. My colleagues among the anthropocentric environmental community have cited a number of concerns that all focus on elevated risk to human communities, to our infrastructure, and to our ecosystem that affect human communities, right? To the Earth's ecosystem, to our climate systems, to our salmon populations. And these, of course, all have profoundly negative effects on human beings. But I'd like to take some time, if I could, to go over some perhaps more spiritual reasons and concerns that we in the environmental community have. The values that we're concerned about at a global level and at a bioregional level are not merely human concerns. I'd like to take just a few minutes to try to take an objective view of our home, of our planet, of our bioregion, and to consider a range of values that really can't be reduced to human benefit. And those values have been expressed over millennia, over millions, and ultimately over billions of years that reflect the value-generating capacities of our planet, of our home. As we know, there are numerous at-risk species in the that use the Columbia River and surrounding forest lands as their home. And when we talk about elevated risk to our waterways and our wildlife, We're talking about elevated risk, for example, to 12 salmon runs that are currently listed as either threatened or endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So each of these species, and there are hundreds others that are not listed that are also at risk, not only fish species, but mammals, birds, plants, flowers, butterflies, etc. There are hundreds of species that this project would put at risk. And each of these species represents an amazing evolutionary achievement. Okay? Every single one of these species that we are thinking about putting at greater risk represents an amazing evolutionary accomplishment. Science, of course, discloses science discloses consequences for human beings when we put too many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Science discloses consequences for human beings, long-term consequences for human communities of causing species to go extinct. Okay? Those are all good human-centered, consequentialist reasons to refuse permission to Vancouver Energy for this oil terminal. But there are also reasons that aren't necessarily related to the effects on human beings, because what science discloses to us, what ecology has disclosed to us, and what biology has disclosed to us in the last 100 years is that evolution is a process that produces value. Each species represents a struggle, a long-term struggle to adapt to a specific niche in the environment. Each one of these salmon species is the genetic signature of a particular place. So that reflects a level of value that we, as environmentalists who don't just worry about the effects of what we do to the earth on human beings, but also worry about the earth itself and all of Earth's creatures. This is what concerns us and alarms us about this proposal. Because right now, instead of contributing to the degradation, potentially catastrophic degradation of our river, we should be restoring our river. We should be cleaning up our river under the terms of the Endangered Species Act. When a species is listed as endangered or threatened, we have to take positive steps to clean up its environment, fix its habitat issues, and get it back on the road to recovery. So the last thing we need to be doing right now is adding yet another layer of industrial problem, pollution, risk onto the backs of our waterway, of our salmon runs. Okay, that's the last thing we need to be doing right now. We need to be cleaning up our river and making our river more hospitable to our salmon runs. So I just want to stress there are at least 4 different levels of values that we're concerned about protecting and that we oppose this oil terminal in order to protect. Geologically, the Columbia River is an incredible geological phenomenon. The gorge, of course, has been dammed and largely it's been harmed by dams for the last 80 years or so. But it remains a geological phenomenon that is worth protecting in and of itself. It's the result of millions of years of geological events, and we should not treat the water and the gorge as an instrument to increase our wealth or make jobs, etc. In light of the awesome geological and evolutionary marvels that ecology and biology have disclosed to us about our home, about the Columbia Gorge, and about the Earth as a whole, it would be unconscionable for us to approve this project. So geologically, ecologically, it's taken millennia for that ecosystem to develop. Biologically, each one of those species has taken millennia, millions of years ultimately to achieve an equilibrium in its environment. And these are all processes which, as human beings, that an enlightened society should pay heed to and respect and take care to avoid harming if at all possible. So we are, as you know, Governor, in the middle of, the 5th or the 6th mass extinction event that we're aware of. And this is the first mass extinction event in planetary history that is caused entirely by one species. Now that we know this, and have known this for quite some time, we are obligated to take measures to reverse the catastrophic course that we're on with our reliance on fossil fuels, and a project that encourages and facilitates ongoing reliance on fossil fuels for the next 3 or 4 decades is simply unacceptable to an enlightened society. So I would urge you, Governor Inslee, as the leader of our state, to take a firm stand against this project and to consider the ancient values that are at stake here. Humans are a late-coming species, and in the last 200 years we've caused all kinds of disruption, destabilization, disintegration of our ecosystems. But these systems manage to hold themselves together for millennia, and it's unconscionable for one animal to take itself as superior to all of the world's other living organisms and call itself enlightened. So thank you, Governor, for taking the time to listen to us, and again, I urge you to deny this permit.
Well said.
Awesome, thank you so much. So, thank you very much. You can clearly see.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. As you can clearly see, the risks outweigh the rewards here. This is not good for our community because it puts more jobs at risk than what you are even providing. It's not good for America because when that oil does reach the global market, where does it go? And it is not a decided factor there. And also, for the sake of Southwest Washington and our environment, this clearly violates the intrinsic value of the Columbia River Basin, which we've all grown up here to enjoy and love. So thank you again, Governor Inslee.
I do have a couple other observations which I'd like to share since we have time, Governor, if you don't mind. It seems to me that we ought to be encouraging a culture. We ought to be encouraging the development of a culture that interacts harmoniously and sustainably with its natural environment. And so, if that's accepted, I think you would probably agree with that, Governor Inslee. That's kind of the overall goal of an enlightened society, to interact sustainably with its natural resources. And so, in my view, this proposed oil terminal will do the opposite of that. This proposed oil terminal will encourage us as a culture to remain addicted to an energy system that is completely unsustainable, that is inconsistent with what we know about Earth's climate systems and Earth's living communities. So what I'm suggesting is that, Governor, you can make a decision that's consistent with cultural excellence in the sense of a culture that is aware of its own limitations and lives within its means. Or you can encourage, if you approve this oil terminal, what you will be effectively doing, Governor, is you'll be encouraging a culture of vice, a culture of addiction and irrational behavior. And lastly, none of us on the executive panel have yet mentioned the treaty fishing rights that have been upheld in our judicial system countless times, that secure to the indigenous tribes of the Northwest, most of the indigenous tribes in the Northwest, the right to continue harvesting salmon at their usual and custom places. And while I would never pretend to try to reconstruct an indigenous person's reasons for although it's not hard, it doesn't take much imagination to understand why salmon are so important to the indigenous cultures of the Northwest. But I'd like to point more, I'd just like to leave it at this. Our ancestors signed treaties. Representatives of the United States government signed treaties with representatives of the indigenous peoples of this region. And under those treaties, it's at least plausible and reasonable to accept obligation on the part of our government to preserve and protect the fisheries environment so that the tribes can continue harvesting salmon. And such protection of their fisheries environment might well be implied in the language of the treaties themselves, although that issue hasn't been finally decided by the courts yet. But I would urge you to again consider that approval of this oil terminal might well itself constitute a violation of our government's obligations. The federal governments and the state governments of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho as successors to the U.S. government in this part of our country, we might well have treaty obligations to deny permission for this project, given the fact that it will substantially elevate risk to fish that are protected under those treaties. So, with that, we'll take a short break, I think, and then we'll come back and begin with testimony from our Group A conservationists. Okay? So if anybody wants to take a 4 or 5 minute break, feel free to do so right now. All right, since we're running ahead of schedule.
Alright, so I think that when it's our turn, we still get up and then.
Yeah, to this.
Going down the aisle.
Wait, so we're sitting here, are we doing?
No, we're
Instead of
stand
sitting
over there.
there, we're gonna stand like that PowerPoint, so everyone just turn around like right here.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Well, I guess it'll be video first,
for the quality of the.
Yeah, I was thinking since we're focusing on I was thinking like be closer to the person we're arguing towards. Because he's technically the one.
Yeah.
We'll probably do
Oh yeah, you guys don't. You're always known for closing the first round.
Yeah, we did kind of plan on setting ourselves up.
Yeah, I guess that'll be okay.
We can always grab the power back and just like.
No, we don't have readers. That's like all I mean.
Yeah.
I was just gonna read off my slides.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much.
I did the ESP thing.
Oh, but you're in, so don't forget to say the last.
You want me to say this?
So, the last thing. So,
Yeah, no, I have someone else say you can
and
fix
then
this.
we'll go with that, and then
But whatever you don't cover, I'll just.
Oh, also we won't be able to advance the slides. We won't be able to advance the slides.
Yeah, we'll just like tactically.
Yeah, we can't.
Video, we'll just press the button.
We could enlist one of our friendly executives to be a friendly contribution to our community.
No, I'd rather do it.
No, yeah,
Because
yeah.
I don't know exactly where I'm at.
No, for sure.
Not like I'm in.
Yeah.
I put down on those.
No, yeah.
I'm gonna cover about stuff. I'm just gonna talk about what we actually.
No matter what you have prepared, whatever.
Should we get the computer on now? I don't know if it's on.
Yeah, let's take a
Since
look
we've got
at
a
it.
break.
Get it ready, yeah.
Because I think we're the only one with the PowerPoint.